Hello and welcome to Future Workers on the Future of Work. This live broadcast is part of the course How Technology Shapes the Workplace of the Future, which is jointly organised by EPFL's College of Humanities and the University of Lausanne's Faculty of Business and Economics. I am Zach Barler. I'm studying Business and Management at Durham University in the UK, and I'm an exchange student with the University of Lausanne. With me today is Felipe.
Hi everyone, I'm Felipe. I'm studying Industrial Engineering at the State University of Campinas in Brazil. And like Zach, I'm also an exchange student at HEC Lausanne. Today's event, it's about the future of work from our perspective as future workers, since we will be graduating soon and going on the labor market. Technology is having an enormous impact on the workplace. We are going to discuss how that will affect us as we start and develop our careers. Joining us today in the studio are students from EPFL and the University of Lausanne, as well as some of the professors from the course.
Indeed, and we are going to focus on 4 areas today: automation, recruiting, skills, and privacy. If you would like to join in, please write your questions and thoughts in the comments section on the YouTube page or use the hashtag #FutureOfWork, and we will try to get them included in the discussion. Without further ado, let's get started. Hello everyone, the first topic we're going to be discussing today is automation. Now, the author Yuval Noah Harari said that technology is going to create what he called the useless class. The useless class are people whose jobs have been taken over by machines and people who suffer from constant psychological distress because of constantly losing their jobs. And this is a really interesting notion. So we want to ask whether automation of workplaces is already making humans useless and unemployable. We also want to ask how we can deal with the disruption that this technology is causing in our society. Joining us for this discussion are 3 students from the University of Lausanne, Jose, Kwan-Wu, and Georg, and we also have 2 professors with us, also from the University of Lausanne, Daniel Ersch and Benjamin Muller. So to all my participants, what do you think? Is automation making human workers useless and unemployable? I don't actually think we have Jose here, actually, so we'll start with... Let's see, we start with Kwan-Wu, and then we'll go on to Georg, and then we'll let our professors come in and respond.
Sure, thank you. I think automation is really happening all around the world with a lot of tasks being automated. Now, if we talk about useless class, that I'm not sure. I'm definitely positive with that jobs are becoming useless. We can talk about useless jobs. Now, can we talk about useless human? I'm not really sure. If human have certain jobs that are becoming automated, we should be prepared to adapt to that. And if they have certain skills and they try to develop that and work with the automated system, well, that people won't become those people won't become useless. The jobs, their current jobs might become useless, but I don't see this as a problem for useless human.
Okay, so you have a much more optimistic view of the labour market in the future then?
Yes, that is. I think that we should not look at this only from a technological aspect, only focused on how technology is going to change our society, but also that how humans are going to adapt. And I think that we will make modifications and adaptations towards the technology and learn these new skills with the technology and change our skills and become very useful in the future.
That's a really encouraging viewpoint. I think we can all hope that that's definitely the case. Georg, do you have anything you'd like to add? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your take?
I like the expression that there are useless jobs, but there won't be a useless class. And I think that as well, because throughout history, technological progress has vastly shifted the composition of employment and from across various industries. And the concern about technological unemployment has since then been proven to be exaggerated. Yes, and the obvious reason for that is, I would say, that humans can learn and can how to say that, can learn, and we can adapt to new things, and we always have. So I believe that we will do that as well. Yeah.
So you also are much more optimistic than this author. So if we can just bring Kwan Wu back, actually, because I'd like to just have both of you together. What I'm really curious to ask between both of you then is, do you think almost there's an element of trying to deliberately create fear amongst people with automation, because you both present a much more optimistic point of view compared to other people?
Yeah, I would say for sure, definitely there are, like, if an article gets posted, the writer probably has the intention to get as much attention as possible and to reach as many people as possible. So I believe that yes, many fears or many concerns might be presented exaggerated, and in order to catch attention and in order to lead to increasing sales of the publisher. So I believe, yes, it can be, or most of sometimes it definitely is exaggerated. Yeah, I believe that. Yes.
Okay, that's really interesting. Let's bring in our professors now. Let's bring in Daniel and Benjamin. What do you make of all of this? Do you think that actually we don't need to be nervous, much like Kwan Wu and Georg have said, or do you think differently? Do you think actually maybe there is an element of concern to be had? Should we start with Daniel?
So thank you very much for inviting me. I very much share the view by Georg and Kwan Wu. I think if you want to be heard by people in the media, make a prophecy that is very dramatic. Can be totally wrong, normally is, but people write and talk about it. I think we have good reasons to be optimistic for at least three elements. First, history. I mean, look at our country, Switzerland. 1900, we had 30% of all people in agriculture. Today, we have 3%. And at the same time, total employment has tripled over time. We could take the US, we could take other European countries, we would see the same thing. Many low-skilled routine jobs disappeared, and despite this, many more people are working. Second point that we could look at is, where do people go today who have little skills? We did the research with Rafael Lalive and Giuliano Bonoli, who are part of this team, to see where people in social assistance in Lausanne go. And to our surprise, we found quite a bit of rotation. So many people coming into social assistance, having little skills and foreign backgrounds or language problems, found jobs as cleaners, cooks, drivers, nursing aides, waiters, and so on. So the low-skilled labor market has become smaller, but it has by no means dried up completely. And finally, I'm optimistic also because people like personal services because they are done by persons. So you want the person to help to check on your elderly mother. You want the person for a massage. You want the person as teacher, as private teacher, and the person as fitness coach. So in this sense, I think there's a huge demand in future still for humans and personal services.
Okay, so Daniel, would you then say as well, based off that actually, if there's something that this pandemic has taught us, it is that actually whilst technology is great, there's nothing quite like the human touch?
I think you as students are the first to experience this, no? I mean, teaching in many regards is similar, on-site or in distance, but the very crucial input is lacking, personal contact, before, after, informal. So in this sense, I think the pandemic has shown us that we can replace some things by technology, but by no means everything.
That's very interesting. Benjamin, I'd like to bring you in now. What do you think of all of this? Do you agree with what's been said? Do you disagree? What's your position?
I think it's not much of a surprise that I personally share a lot of the optimism that's been shared around the room. Also, kind of given my background in research and the teaching that I do. But I think that is probably not surprising with a panel of technocrats from the two schools that are involved here today. Also because we're not the people who are on the front line of this change. And while I agree that societally we're probably looking at a bright future if we manage to put technology to work, not just for us, but with us, it's important to acknowledge that throughout all these industrial revolutions, of which we now propose to be in the fourth, people at what we refer to as the lower skilled end of the spectrum have gone through tremendous structural changes that required a lot of personal sacrifice. And all the optimism that we as a group share should probably not make us blind to the fact that there is a lot of imposition here. If you look at the topic specifically we're discussing in this round, I think it's easy to paint technology as the enemy, right? It's automation, it's machines that are taking away our jobs. I think the far larger threat that we need to sensitize ourselves towards, also as future decision makers, managers, and entrepreneurs, is that the social systems that are built around this world that is emerging are much more important. We're seeing a tremendous amount of precarious employment these days. We're seeing a tremendous push towards micro-employment, micro-tasking platforms around the world that are painting a very new picture of globalization that has a lot of social issues connected to it. So whether or not we'll make the most of it is probably not a challenge of technological design, but it is a challenge of social appreciation and a lot of work that we need to put into this to design societies of tomorrow where we live with technology in a desirable way.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's really encouraging. It's actually quite nice to hear some very optimistic views, given that the view I presented at the start of this discussion was much more pessimistic. Now, I think on this note, I'd just like to ask you very quickly if you could just describe how you're feeling about automation in the future in one word. How would the four of you describe it? Let's start with the Benjamin. Go on.
Opportunity.
Daniel? We didn't hear you, Daniel. Change.
Sorry, challenge.
Challenge. Okay. Georg?
Liberating.
Liberating. And Kwame, finally.
It'll be two words, but new territory.
New territory. That's brilliant. Well, thank you all of you for this excellent discussion about the disruptions that technology is causing in the labour market. To those of you watching, please let us know your thoughts via the comments section on the YouTube page or use the hashtag #FutureOfWork. Next, we are going to talk about how technology is affecting hiring. But first, we are going to be taking a short break. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Felipe Scamis. I'm an exchange student from Brazil at HEC Lausanne. And this is the second part of the event, Future Workers on the Future of Work. For those of you who are joining us now, this event is organized as part of the course How Technology Shapes the Workplace of the Future, offered by EPFL and the University of Lausanne. In the second part, we are going to talk about anonymous recruiting, because technology is not changing only the work environment. It is also changing how businesses recruit people. But these new methods also raise serious concerns about equality and fairness, especially in the context of anonymous recruiting, for example. To talk about this, we have Professor Juliana Bonoli, and again, 3 students from University of Lausanne, Ellen, Hugo, and Alex. Ellen, could you tell us first, what is anonymous recruiting? Could you define this for us?
Yeah, well, I would say that it is when you don't get any names, age, background, like anything where the person lives during the recruiting process. So you only get the relevant info like education and work history.
Good, thank you. And now directing still to the other students, I would like to ask Hugo, what are some of the direct benefits or the risks that you see with anonymous recruiting, if you see any risk or benefits?
Yeah, thank you, Felipe. I think that I see a lot of risks, actually, and I will be glad to exchange with you about that. But I think that the big risk that a machine like can't detect a feeling, you can't know if the candidate will lie to the machine, and you don't have like this feeling, you don't have the real personality, because actually you can have a lot of personality tests and etc. But I mean, when you are face to face, you have this true feeling, and I think this true feeling can't be tested by the machine, So for me, that's the biggest risk, because you're losing the human contact, and for me, that's one of the biggest risks.
Okay, thank you. I would like to extend the same question to Alex, if possible, and also if Ellen wants to add up on this.
Say that, yeah, I agree with you. Of course, the contact is important, but at the same time, there are so many studies saying how there is, a gender, a racial, disability bias in recruiting. That at some point, at least partial anonymous recruiting is useful, just in reducing those biases, at least in the first stages of the recruitment process. And then for the later stages of the interview, etc., then we can do more face-to-face contact. But just before leaving the speaker, I would just say one number, and it's 250,000 people. That's how many people applied to Goldman Sachs summer internship this year. So at some point, you have to have some kind of pre-selection that can be, anonymous and automated and everything. And then in the later stage, then you can have the face-to-face.
Thank you. Really great point. And for you, Ellen?
Yeah, I would say I agree with Alex that I think anonymous recruiting, it's good in the beginning of the process, because that takes away it's good in the beginning of the process, but then in the end, you want to see the person and actually see if the personality and everything else is fit for the job. But in the beginning, yes, I would say it's a good thing, especially in governmental recruiting, and yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I would like to hear from Juliana. What are your thoughts on this? What are the direct risks that you see? And if you agree with we students in the sense that it is important, at least in the beginning of the recruiting process.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. I think this is a brilliant discussion that we are having on a very important topic. And there is quite a bit of literature on anonymous recruitment and on how employers recruit in general. And maybe one important thing is that employers recruit according to skills, according to experience, but they're also very much concerned about personality.
And personality is difficult to see in a CV, in an anonymous CV even more. And so we know from various research projects that we have done, that other people have done, that employers will try to interpret every piece of information that is made available to them as meaningful for personality, for motivation, for some characteristics that are considered to be important. And the idea is, with anonymous recruiting, to at least remove some factors that we know are used by employers to infer something about the personality, the motivation, the productivity of people that can result in discrimination. So someone has said before, like disability, age, gender, nationality, or ethnic origin. The problem is that there have been tests of anonymous recruitment, and they're not so unequivocal as we would expect. We would have expected that anonymous recruitment, so basically the human who makes the decision whether or not to invite the person, gets a version of the CV where the information with regard to name, nationality, age, address, and anything that can sort of convey an image of the social status of the person is deleted. And there is, for example, a very famous study done in France where the opposite happened. So when anonymous recruitment was practiced, it was migrants, it was people living in disadvantaged areas were less likely to be invited for an interview. And the researchers who did this believed that it's because these people who are disadvantaged people, let's not forget, so people in France who live in the banlieues who have a migration background tend to have factors of disadvantage that remain visible in the CV, like, I don't know, long unemployment spells, maybe incomplete education. And the recruiter just saw this and so concluded this person is not going to be very productive, I don't mind them on my firm. Whereas other recruiters who have access to the whole information, so including the area where they live, the disadvantaged area where they live, the fact that they have a migration background, and so on, these recruiters made sense, were able to give a sense to the disadvantage that they saw, and they were more likely to invite these people. So there are other studies that show that anonymous recruitment can also be effective, but the point I'm trying to make is that it is no panacea, that it's not enough to delete a line or two in a CV to delete a life of disadvantage.
Okay, so I think this quite answers one of the questions that we had on the chat, that can recruiting be truly anonymous? Like for you, Giuliano, you don't think that it could be 100% anonymous, and maybe it will not be as useful as we think?
I think in some contexts it can be very useful. And maybe this idea originated really in the US when classical music orchestra, started recruiting musicians by auditioning them behind the screen, so that the recruiters could only hear the quality of the sound of the execution. And then some researchers noted that women were much more likely to be hired in this case than when people were seen. And this is a setup where I think there is a lot of discrimination, but at the end of the process, so just before recruitment, women were discriminated against because there is a wonderful article on this, because in the music industry, there was a perception that women were less suitable than men as top musicians in the classical music area. And so they were discriminated, but not before, just before hiring, but they had the same access to good quality schooling. So they had the same level of proficiency. They were just discriminated at the end of the process. Now let's move to France and the banlieues and those with a migrant background. That's a different story. These people suffer from discrimination from the day they're born, more or less. And this discrimination and disadvantage sort of translates into CVs that are less appealing to employers. And in this case, instead, an anonymous CV is not so useful. So I think I cannot have at least an absolute position on anonymous CVs, whether they're good or bad. I think it depends on the context. And I've given you two extreme examples. Most situations are probably in the middle.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now I wanted to ask a quick and I think last question in this topic for the students. Would you feel comfortable participating in a recruiting process that is partially or totally automated? Starting with Hugo, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good discussion. Also, that maybe one thing I wanted to say is that if the problem we're trying to solve by doing all of this is related to discrimination during interviews. Maybe it's not the recruitment method that must be changed, but rather the recruiter, and the mentality. But that's quite a difficult point. But I'm not discriminated, unfortunately, because stereotypes. So I will feel obliged to answer certain questions if I do a fully automated recruitment process. So that's not natural to me, because I'm not the best, I'm not the brightest or more intelligent students, but I have other quality that I think I prefer to give to a human, so he or she can really understand who I am, and I am afraid that maybe a computer won't understand that. So for me, no, I won't feel that much comfortable, even if I agree with Alex that maybe at the beginning it can be more or less okay to do it by computer, but fully automated, no, I won't be at my ease with that.
Thank you. And what about Alex and Ellen?
Well, I agree. I mean, yes, it's not a good process for students. Like everything is mass recruiting right now. It's always mass recruitment, and companies are hiring tons of students from tons of other students, and it's very hard to get yourself apart. But yeah, if that can avoid biases and avoid other problems, why not? I think we understand that's how it must be, and because you understand why they are doing it, I think, at least me, I'm much more willing to say, okay, I agree to have, higher views and standardized tests and everything. And maybe I will be judged not only for my stereotype, but also for my skills, for my results in the test, etc., in a more, unbiased and neutral way. So yeah, I think I'm comfortable with that.
Cool, thank you. And what about Ellen?
Yeah, I would at least for a partly automated process, because I myself, I have a disability. So I think it might be like make it more equal, the process.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you all for participating on this discussion. Indeed, technology is changing the recruiting and what this means for ensuring a fairer labor market. Do let us know your thoughts via the comment section on the YouTube page or by using the hashtag future of work. Coming up, we are going to talk about the skills we need to succeed in the workplace of the future. But first, we are going to have a short break. Stay with us and we will be back soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to Future Workers on the Future of Work. If you are just joining us, this live event is part of the course How Technology Shapes the Workplace of the Future, which is organised by EPFL and the University of Lausanne. I'm Zach, an exchange student at the University of Lausanne. In the third part of this event, we're going to talk about skills. Technology is evolving at a truly unbelievable rate. First, we had the computer, then the internet. Now we have virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. It's fair to say a lot has changed in a rather short period of time. But as technology evolves and becomes key to every part of business, we ask whether our skills can keep up with this rate of change. Now, joining me for this discussion, we should actually have Ellen as well, but I don't know, she's not on the screen at the moment. Here she is. Okay, Ellen, who like Felipe and me is an exchange student. We have Professors Tobias Schlager and Benjamin Muller as well from the University of Lausanne. And we also have Helen, who's a postdoc from the University of Lausanne as well. Now, I'm first going to ask my fellow exchange student, Ellen. Then we'll bring in Tobias, and then we'll bring in Helen, and then Benjamin. So, Ellen, what do you think? Can our skills keep up with the changes we're seeing and the rate of technological evolution in the modern day?
Yeah, I think that we're used to evolving all the time. So I think that our skills will be good enough, or if they're not, we're gonna learn some more, and in the end this will be good.
So you think that also maybe because the world is constantly changing in terms of technology, that maybe that's translating into how we learn as well, and that we actually never stop learning? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. I think we nowadays we always learn something new, and we always have to keep learning something new, because otherwise we can't keep up with society.
Well, that's very encouraging. Let's now bring in Tobias. I think let's bring in. So what do you think about all of this? Because we can be very optimistic about this, but we do have to be careful as well, don't we? And make sure that our skills remain relevant as technology evolves.
Absolutely. So I think in fact the skills that are relevant to deal with those technologies might change, or the required skills might change. It might, of course, not be the same skills that one has applied or has used or that were required in the recent past. At the same point of time, I think what one, especially when looking, for instance, at virtual reality and augmented reality, I think it's important to recognize that those technologies oftentimes try to make it a little bit easier for people actually to use actual technology. So, in a sense, I would say that these naturalistic, so these very natural interactions with those technologies can actually also make specific things more accessible for those people.
Okay, that's a very interesting point. So I'd like to just sort of now bring in Benjamin. What do you think about that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What is your take on all of this?
I'm probably going to build on what you took away from Ellen's statement earlier, Zach, in that I think what we need to start realizing is that we need to embrace the change that there will be as an almost constant on our skill profiles in the future. I think we've all grown up in systems, and we've grown accustomed to systems where, especially when we go to university, we're very specifically trained with a very unique skill for a very long time in our lives. And then once we head out, degree in hand and all proud, we tend to assume that has prepared us for life. I think those times are very much gone. What we need to recognize is how much of a challenge it is to keep our skills profiles relevant in the light also of changing tasks, changing jobs, and changing overall challenges. We're riding into a century with, I think, unprecedented challenges for humanity, not just environmentally, but also socially and economically. And to be ready to face those, not globally, not all at once on the macro level, but step by step as the problems become more tangible, we need fitting skill sets in diverse global teams. And we also need the skill set to orchestrate and manage that work. And that, to me, as a university professor, I think first and foremost is a challenge very much right on our front door, because what we've been doing for the last 50 years probably won't prepare people for exactly that future. Back to you.
Okay, that's a very interesting approach. So I'd now like to actually bring in Helen, our postdoc. And I would like to ask you, sort of based off what was just said, do you think we need to revolutionize and change education so that we can keep our skills relevant in the future?
I think that education is changing, actually. I think that the program and the content of the course is constantly evolving. Professors are aware of the technical changes and they are including it in their course. And also they develop more and more also innovative way to teach. So I think that all of this is also is evolving at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think Benjamin wants to come in and respond to that. Benjamin,
I'm delighted to hear Helen's optimism, who's been working with professors now for a while. I think in light of the experiences we've made recently, there is a very real litmus test right in front of our noses these days, and it's going to be revolving around on how we bounce back from this disruption of higher education that we've seen now. And there are many paths in front of us, but I don't see that there is kind of a unison agreement yet that we're embracing exactly that challenge and that opportunity that Helen has pointed out. So there is going to be a lot of work, and this is going to be just as painful and just as effortful as the structural changes I alluded to in the very first session, Zach.
Okay, that's very interesting. Ellen, our exchange student, Ellen, I'd like to bring you in on this as well. Where do you stand on all this? Do you agree with Benjamin, or do you agree with Helen? So Helen saying that education is changing, Benjamin sort of saying it still needs to change.
Well, yeah, it probably still needs to change, but it is especially some of the professors, like, it is evolving. Some are taking new aspects and like developing the courses every year, and of course there is always some people that want to do it the same way because it's always worked that way. But I see it. I'm an optimist in that way. So.
That's very encouraging. So would you say that this course that we've done, this How Technology Shapes the Workplace of the Future, is a start on that road towards a change, or do you think maybe there needs to be even more of a push?
Well, yeah, I think it's definitely a start. It's been a total different course that I've ever taken. So, yeah, I would say
everyone who's done this course would probably agree with that. Tobias, I'd like to bring you in on this. Where do you stand on all of this? Do you think that the education is changing? Do you think it's not changed enough? I know that you loved showing us spatial and all these really cool ways of interacting with people. So I would really like to get your view on this.
So yeah, I would agree actually with Benjamin. So I think or let's take it like that. I take a middle standpoint on that. There has been some change, but it definitely still needs to change a lot. So I think just as you said, actually, Benjamin, I think the last year has shown quite obviously the limitations that we still have, the topics that we need to work on. So we have been involved in a project actually that considered the digitalization of teaching and higher education. So not only teaching, but those topics now we have been accommodated to Zoom. I think everybody knows Zoom by now by heart, and Teams as well. And everybody can deal with this, but one can even go one step further when looking at spatial and so forth. So there are a lot of useful tools out there that might still or could be better embraced, actually.
So do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic has been the catalyst that's been needed to change the education system in order to keep our skills relevant? Would you say it's very much, it started at this point, that was minute zero?
I think it was definitely a trigger to rethink what we do and how we teach. I definitely think so. Catalyst probably towards the end, so to really embrace actually those challenges. At the beginning, it was very much improvisation, I guess, but this improvisation kind of triggered this evolution or revolution, one could say.
Okay, that's interesting. So we can all agree then probably that skills they're always important in businesses. They probably all will be. But we've seen a lot of new technologies. So I mentioned in the introduction to this section, things like blockchain and stuff like that. Do you think that that sort of technology gets the attention it deserves? And this is an open question to everybody, because we've got varying perspectives here, from a student, from a professor, from a postdoc. Do you think that these newer technologies are actually getting the attention they deserve in order to equip future workers? Go on, Benjamin. I think you want to start us off.
It's probably due to how we in information systems look at technical evolutions like this one, where I'd say it's not about giving specific technologies attentions, but it's on focusing what these technologies mean for us in terms of how they change what we do and what we're capable of as humans, not just individually, but also collectively, and how we interact with one another, and what additional opportunities are open up here for services from a very business perspective, but also for things such as social care and social presence in distributed or displaced communities as a less for-profit domain, just as an example. So the technologies, I think they deserve attention, but it's important for us to remember that, with the exceptions of a few technical engineering expertise bearers, these technologies should always be means to an end rather than an end in itself.
Okay. Would everyone else agree with that? Helen, would you agree?
I totally agree with that. I also think that a good technology is quite transparent in the way we use it daily. I think it should be, as also Tobias said, it should be easy to use. And the improvement in technology will also make it more accessible to people, as Tobias said. And
okay.
Benjamin.
That's brilliant. Ellen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I agree with this. This what's said.
Everyone else has hit the nail on the head. Brilliant. Excellent. Tobias, do you have any sort of final comments you want to make about skills, given what we've discussed?
Just I wanted to pick up on the point that Benjamin actually made. So the means to the end perspective, and I think this is really important to highlight, that technology should also, for the broader users at least, be considered means to the end. I think this point was very important to consider, not just for the sake of doing it, but really to embrace basically the advantages.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think on that note, we better wrap up the session. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your ideas and how we can keep our skills up to date with the rate of technological change. To those people watching us, please don't forget to let us know your thoughts via the comments section on the YouTube page, or by using the hashtag #FutureOfWork. Moving on, we will go to the final topic of today's event, and that is privacy. But before that, we will take a very quick break, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and welcome back to the final section of Future Workers on the Future of Work, where we discuss the enormous impact of technologies having on how we work. I'm Felipe Scamis, I'm an exchange student at University of Lausanne, and this event is part of the course How Technology Shapes the Workplace of the Future, organized by EPFL and University of Lausanne. Okay, so now we tackle the issue of privacy. Software as a service has changed the way we use technology. Instead of buying expensive software, we now have online services which are accessible to anyone with an internet connection. However, this comes at a price of sharing our personal data, which has become the most valuable commodity nowadays. In this section, we have 5 students from EPFL and the University of Lausanne. We have Victoria, Vincent, George, and Nicholas. I think Jose is not here still, but I want to start with Victoria. What do you think are the long-term consequences of having our data shared with technology companies and governments?
Thanks, Felipe. So I think that it will be like 2 main scenarios that will happen depending of how the data is managed and at which person it owns. So if we are right now, then it's not very legislated. If governments possess our data, we share some things that we're even like not aware that we are sharing. So it will become a problem for privacy, and it will be like ethical issues there. But if we come to a way that we possess our own data, maybe we can find a solution to legislate this, I think.
Thank you, Victoria. I think it's a really good point, especially regarding legislation that you said. I want to extend the same question to Nicholas and Vincent, starting with Nicholas, if possible.
Okay, thank you, Felipe. So yeah, what I want to add here is just that from my side, I think we just sometimes underestimate the danger that are behind the software that we use as a service. I'm thinking maybe of Dropbox or Gmail. And in fact, we store a lot of information in it. We store some contact name. From my experience in the university, we store some data, some information about everything, and we sometimes don't know who can have access to it. So we don't personally. I don't read everything that is on Dropbox and the terms that we have to accept when we subscribe to this software. And I think we sometimes underestimate the fact that okay, everything is stored online, and who can have access to it, and maybe we heard sometimes a scandal with the data that are maybe stolen or just released to the public. And I think this is problematic because of the fact that everyone uses it. So it is easy to use, it's much cheaper, and everyone uses it. So we don't really have the choice to use it. And I think here is the danger.
Yes, great point about everybody using such services, and we are insert in that usual habit of not reading the small lines, so we don't really know what has been done with our data. For you, Vincent, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, first I would like to make the distinction between personal data and general data, the data that when you are surfing on the web. So for me, personal data refers to any information that relates to an identified or identifiable living individual, for example, a name, a surname, a home address, and so on. But first thing I want to highlight is that data we share with companies are often stored in one location on one database. It's a problem if it's hacked because it exposes all the data at once, such as your emails, your credit card information, your WhatsApp messages, and so on. So someone could pretend to be you with these informations. It's just a fact that we need to be aware of when you share your data on a website, a suspicious website. Of course, I'm not talking about Apple or Amazon, but however, for example, Facebook has already been hacked, and maybe your account may be compromised. But to extend the debate, in my opinion, data is playing a major part in developing and feeding technologies such as AI and machine learning. Companies use algorithms to better understand users' behavior and their preferences. It becomes problematic when the companies know you better than yourself. For example, if you want to buy a book online, the algorithm is like, oh, I know you. So based on your past purchases, your location, your friends on different social media, if it has access to these data, all of your history of who you are online, the algorithm will suggest you a book you would like. And it's a first baby step of a shift of authority from humans to algorithm based on our data.
Great. Very pertinent thoughts that you add up, Vincent. I'm going to focus, I'm going to ask again about the consequences after, but first, I wanted to come back on the first topic that you said. Is there any possible way of us to keep good practices in order to keep our privacy secure? Does anyone have any idea about this? Does anyone practice something like this in order to protect our privacy? Maybe starting with Victoria, if you feel so.
I think that you have to be invested in the in this, so to first notice that your data is shared, and then when you know that, it's easy to go and search how to protect your data. For example, the location, you can easily disable that in your devices. So I think it's easy to have a more secure data, but you have to be aware that you are sharing your data first.
Great, thank you. And Vincent, do you have any tips?
Yeah, just be careful when you go on a website or when you open an email that says you win the new iPhone or a new something, a gift. It could be a fraud, and you don't want to be hacked. It's hard to delete information that are on internet, and it could really be a problem for your identity, for your future.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And what about you, Nicholas?
Yeah, so as he said, we have to be careful about what we do online, and also I want to say that when I have to have an important discussion with someone, I usually turn off my phones, or I just like these small tips that maybe are useful to just have some privacy at some times, because we are always sharing data, and yeah, this is maybe the tip I can give.
Thank you. Now coming back on the topic that Vincent was talking about when he first spoke, how can such services change the way we consume and produce data? Maybe starting with Vincent, as you were talking about this before, the thing that you said about companies knowing more about us than ourselves, especially.
Yeah. In fact, it's already happening. I mean, we rely more and more on these technologies about making decisions. It influences our choices, and data tells a lot about who you are. So, for example, what is already happening is the use by governments of tools such as Compass, which is based on machine learning, which predicts the likelihood of recidivism of an individual. And these are tools that could be biased by the same data that they use, and yeah, new patterns could be derived from data to invent similar tools in financial advice, insurance, labor market also. But it's only I think for me it's the beginning, because we produce a lot of data on our phones, on our wearables, such as connected bracelets. And if we shift from biometric data, maybe in the future we could potentially hack humans. We can already influence humans with different content on social media. So yeah, we need to be careful of which direction we are going at in the future with these technologies. I think it's important, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Victoria and Nicholas, do you have anything to add up on this? Any example maybe? Or talk about maybe a positive thing regarding personalized experience and the surveillance of our data all the time?
I think that some companies are starting to realizing that they have to be more transparent with what they are doing with the data. And I think there are some services that are doing like, for example, they take your data, but they securitize all of it, and just then you are asked by company if you want to share this type of data with them, what they are going to do with it in exchange of a value. So I think that this is a good point, a positive point. It will not like make all the will not arrange all the problem, but it's a good start.
Great. And Nicholas?
Yeah, what we can do maybe to know what we exactly share as data to some companies, or maybe it will be great in the future if we can have a better access to know exactly what we are actually sharing, because we can do this actually for some companies like the university or the CFF and so on. We can contact them and ask them, okay, what are the data that you have on me? And I think it will be a big step if we can do the same for some softwares in order to know exactly what they have on us as a data, as information about us.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your insights and for this interesting debate. There you have it. These were the topics and the discussions that we wanted to bring today. In the future workers on the future of work, from automation to recruiting, skills and privacy. We have heard from both students and experts on what we can expect in the workplace of the future. While we may feel a mixture of excitement and fear, one thing is for certain, we can't wait to see what the future holds for us.
Absolutely. And on that note, it is time to end. Please join us in thanking the whole team who put together this amazing event, from Rafael to Vani and Katja, Jeff, Virginie, Tobias, Kevin, Julien, and of course, our wonderful speakers. We will be hosting a more open post-event discussion on spatial with you, our audience, so please do keep an eye out for details. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.